So what a joy and delight and privilege it is to be here, particularly in this holy month of Ramadan, in this sacred and beautiful house of worship. You know, when I was coming in to come to this place in the lounge, I met several people who surprisingly told me that, Jamal, you must tell some Mullah stories. And also, several said, a couple of them said, tell us a little bit about his background, but also about, you say there are 7 levels of meaning, at least one level of meaning you must mention. So what an opportunity to be flexible. What a chance to talk about my most beautiful, powerful, favorite insights from Islamic spirituality. Blessed are the flexible, for they will never be bent out of shape. So the topic is inviting the stranger. So I'll start with a Mullah story. And of course, everything is allegorical. And you might have heard this, but listen again. The Mullah is in the tavern, drinking and drinking and drinking. In the early hours of the morning, he stumbles out of the tavern intoxicated and is walking around aimlessly. And a policeman accosts him and says, "Sir, who are you? Where did you come from? And where are you going?" And Mullah says, "Sir, if I knew the answer to all those questions, I would be home already." So what is this about? It's about the fact that we are, in a cosmic sense, just by virtue of our birth, we are strangers. We are exilees, yearning, thirsting to return home. I think Rumi sums it very beautifully. I'm thinking of a verse when he uttered, "We all arrived here a little bit tipsy. And after some time, we realized that this drunkenness must have started in some other tavern beyond." Okay, that's in a cosmic sense, the stranger. Then, you know, a great difficulty we all have is that we are strangers to ourselves. Meaning we forget who we really are at our core. Yes, we are our personality, the I, the me, which is nothing more than a bundle of conditioned reactions to life's circumstances. But we're also our higher self, our divine essence, Christ nature, Buddha nature, Allah nature, Elohim nature, Krishna nature. But do we really believe that? Who am I? That's a major problem. Problem meaning it's the difficulty of not knowing who we are, and it's the solution. If we really knew who I really am, this world would be different. The Mullah story. The Mullah goes as far as China for a financial transaction. He enters the bank, and after some conversation, the financial officers say, "Sir, do you have some identification that proves that you are who you say you are?" What does the Mullah do? He reaches into his pocket. He takes out a pocket mirror. Keeps gazing at it for a long time. And finally says, "Yup, that's me all right, I certify it." And what is this about? We have no idea who we really are. And that is because the question is, in my life, how do I define myself? In fact, Rumi says, there are several reasons why we don't know who we really are. The first reason is, we define ourselves and also the other by our external reality. I'm a Sufi minister, I've written so many books, I drive this kind of car. I am missing out on my inner reality, on my Christ nature, Allah nature, Buddha nature. So the second point Rumi makes is that why do we lapse into that forgetfulness? So the great sages say, ponder on this. Does someone who inherits wealth appreciate the value of wealth. We received our soul, our divine nature for free. We don't value it. We don't honor it. We take it for granted. We just talk about it. Third reason, says the great sages, including Rumi, say the insight is, it's okay, Brother Jamal, it's okay. Be compassionate. It's all right. That's why you are here placed on earth. Foredoomed to forget so you might remember. Foredoomed to slumber so you might awaken. So now the question arises, how do I connect with my higher self? How do I get to know who I really am at my core? Many traditions, including Christianity, says, observe yourself. Get to know yourself. But always, 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 the Sufis say, with mercy, gentleness, and compassion for yourself. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he famously said, know thyself, and you shall know thy sustainer. Die before you die. Die to all that is false within you before you die a physical death. But this means I make a commitment right now to observe myself non-judgmentally. The Hindus say it's like two birds on the branch of a tree. One bird is pecking away at the fruit. The fruit could be sweet, the fruit could be bitter, that's life. But I'm also the other bird, just observing. Just observing. You see what happens if I observe myself, that's like a light. And the more compassionate I am, the more powerful, luminous is the light, and the light begins to dissolve those shadows. And we begin to come closer and closer as we peel off layers of our ego, our shadows, closer and closer to who I really am at my core. Rumi, you are a ruby in the midst of granite. How long will you continue to deceive us? For we can see the look in your eyes. So please return to the root of the root of the root of your real self. So make a commitment right now to switch on that light of self-witnessing for a lifetime. So Mullah Stories really help. If I don't observe myself, how will I ever be aware of my biases, my prejudices, my stuckness, my attachments? How will I ever reach my deepest core? So here's a story I've said before, but let's ponder on it very deeply. The mullah always goes on a constitutional walk. On one moonlit night, he happens to be walking, and he happens to come across a well. He peers inside the well, and he's alarmed. The moon has fallen into the well. Sister Moon, fear not. He rushes home, gets a rope and a hook. He flings it down. He probably grabs something. He heaves and pushes and pulls. And something comes loose. He falls on his back. And he sees the moon restored to its proper domain. And he says, thank God I came along. And what does this mean? You see, the ego has such an exaggerated opinion about itself. And a lot of it is a product of our biases, our conditioned stereotyping and prejudices. Okay, the story which I, Ted, and Don, the Interfaith Amigos, we have said I don't know how many times all over the country, the cheese sandwich story. The mullah goes to work, opens his lunch pail. What does he find? A cheese sandwich. Second day, third day, fourth day, it's always a lousy cheese sandwich. 10th day, I'm getting sick and tired of this lousy cheese sandwich. So his puzzled co-worker said, Mullah, why don't you ask your wife to make you a different kind of sandwich? Be persuasive. I'm not married. Who makes them? I do. So are we aware of our stuckness in our patterns of thinking? in our patterns of doing, behaving in our lives. And if you're not aware, if I'm not self-witnessing myself, how will I ever go beyond them? Okay, let's do one more. And this is really about something very serious, particularly in these uncertain times, to ask ourselves, where do I get my source of wisdom? And to become aware of how slavishly dependent we are on our biased sources of information. Authorities, pundits. I mean, I always look to New York Times, Christian Scientist Monitor, certain radio stations, certain columnists. You know, I am slavishly dependent on that. It just validates my opinion, which I already have because of my biases, because of my conditioning. And particularly being slavishly dependent on authorities, on experts. Forgetting that within us, we have this precious, valuable inner teacher. Yes, consult all those great pundits and experts, but always, as Prophet Muhammad said, consult your heart. Consult your heart. He would repeat it. I'm not saying Muslims are following that, obviously not. I'm not saying non-Muslims are following that. So the famous story is the mullah is deathly ill, and his wife is crying and wailing, and now comes in this authority. And who's the authority? The allopathic medical doctor. And he examines the mullah at length and then turns to the wife and says, "Oh, honorable wife of the mullah, the Quran says only Allah is immortal. Your husband is dead. His soul has flown to the bosom of God." He's going on and on. But the mullah is not dead. He's feebly saying, "I'm alive, I'm alive, I'm alive, I'm alive." And what has the wife said? The wife bursts in saying, "Quiet, don't argue with the doctor." Okay, I'm looking at the time. Another aspect about the stranger, the other, the one who is outside our tribe. Whether it's religion, whether it's race, whether it's politics. How do we go beyond this polarization? We know from history that some say the only way, but the best way is to get to know the other on a human level. I repeat, on a human level. No need to talk about a discussion about the differences we have in politics or in religion. That entangles us. But to really connect human to human. In Central Asia, we say, can you share 3 cups of tea? Listen, respect, connect. And can you share stories? As you know, this famous saying, this universe is not made out of atoms. It's made out of stories. Of course, the question we always get is, that's nice and beautiful, but what if the person is adversarial? You know, I can probably summarize it in a beautiful saying by that 15th century mystic, Kabir, who said, the fish in the water are not thirsty. He said, do what is right. Protect yourself. Don't allow yourself to be abused. Take the right action. But as you take the right action, I beg you, please, do not keep this person's essence, being, divine nature, out of your heart. We are fighting the antagonism, not the antagonist. I am angry at the person's behavior, which could be evil, but that person's essence or being can never be evil. And just keeping this discernment in my mind and heart, the great sages say, has the power to shift heaven and earth. What if somebody is really adversarial? You know, I just came back from a talk I had in the islands. The morning session, the afternoon session went very well. The evening session, I did not handle it very well. There was someone there, there's several people there who were just interrupting and saying, you're a liar, the Quran is filled with violence. It was very, very blatant. I got into, shall I say, unnecessary debate. I did not practice what I preach. It's all about connection. So what I could have done, because this is what the Interfaith Amigos always preach, if somebody is so blatant, absolutely Islamophobic, anti-Semitic, or a great racist, tell them just one thing. Is there anything I can tell you that would help you change your mind? Almost betting 100% that person says no. Then we say, please understand that there's nothing you can tell me that would help me change my mind about what I am saying. So having cleared that, let's connect on a human level, and let's focus on issues that are dear to both our hearts. Social justice issues, earth care. So I love this saying by Rumi, who says, oh God, you have created this I, you, we, they, to play the game of adoration with yourself. We should play this game more often. I'm coming to the end of the time, but I cannot resist one more Mullah story and then one more insight after that. The Mullah, some of you heard this story, he goes all over the world. So he's in London Museum, and this very famous professor says, this is 10,000 years old approximately. Mullah says, excuse me, is 10,004 years old. The guide is a little bit annoyed. Goes on, this is 50,000 years old. Excuse me, 50,004 years old. Very annoyed. Happens one third time. This is 75,000 years old. Excuse me, 75,004 years old. And now the professor is very furious. He says, sir, you have a beard, you have a turban that tells me you're from the mysterious East. But how can you be so precise, laser precise about these dates? Mullah says, simple. I was here 4 years ago. At that time, you mentioned those dates. And what is that about? It applies to us right now. Brother Jamal, is later than you think. It is both literal and metaphorical in your lives. It's later than you think. Do the things, say the things you really want to do in your life. Okay, one last insight I want to make very quickly is that, and we wrote a book about it, the Interfaith Amigos, the critical need for spiritual practices. Two things I'll very briefly mention. I was on a panel, and this African-American professor, he gave this statistic that every 28 hours, an African-American is being killed by state-sponsored violence. Terrible statistic. He said that's not the real problem. The real problem is the African-American is being killed 1 billion times a day by those biased, stereotyped, prejudicial thoughts I have, you have in our minds. They're lazy, they're violent, they're this, they're that. And this is the crux of the problem. Of course, legislation will help. Programs will have tremendous assistance. But if you really want a structural change, it requires spiritual practices. And the last point I want to make is about the environment, how critical it is. We really don't treat nature, Mother Planet, as the stranger. So I'll just say a beautiful insight by this very accomplished scientist who was advisor to President Jimmy Carter in the White House. And he said that, I've always thought the biggest environmental problems are loss of biodiversity, ecosystem collapse, and climate change. And with 30 years of good science, we could overcome them. He says, I am convinced now the biggest environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And scientists cannot help to solve that. This requires spiritual practices. So I'll end like I've ended before. Whenever I've spoken here, may we take to heart this beautiful insight by the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, who said, Jamal, when you arrived here from the invisible world, everybody was laughing and smiling, but you were crying and crying and crying. Live such a life that when you are departing for the invisible world, everybody around you is crying and weeping, but you are laughing and smiling. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you.